My name is Eleanor Thompson, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be testing my own son. When Ryan asked about my finances last month, a strange impulse seized me. I told him my teacher's pension was only $1,000 instead of the $3,000 I actually receive. Something about his ambitious personality made me wonder, would he care if he thought I was struggling? What followed over the next few weeks completely transformed how I saw my son. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you how my little deception changed everything between us. To understand why I did something so out of character, you need to know a bit about my life. For 35 years, I taught 4th grade at Lincoln Elementary in Boston. I loved every minute with those children, watching their eyes light up when something finally clicked. Teaching wasn't just my career, it was my calling. My husband Gregory and I built a good life together. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we were comfortable. Greg worked as an architect at a small firm, designing residential homes. He had such an eye for creating spaces that felt lived in even before the foundation was poured. We met in college, both of us ambitious dreamers with big plans. After 40 years of marriage, 3 children, and countless memories, I lost him to a sudden heart attack 5 years ago. The morning it happened still plays in my mind like a film reel I can't shut off. Greg was making coffee in the kitchen, complaining about the Patriots game from the night before. I was reading the newspaper at the table, only half listening to his playful rants. Then came the crash of his coffee mug hitting the floor. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was already gone. Losing Greg left a void in my life that nothing could fill. But it also thrust me into a world of financial decisions I wasn't prepared for. Greg had always handled our investments and retirement planning. Suddenly, I was alone with a stack of insurance forms, pension paperwork, and a future that looked nothing like we'd planned. Thankfully, my teaching pension provided $3,000 monthly. Combined with Social Security and Greg's life insurance, I was able to maintain a modest but comfortable lifestyle in my small apartment at Sunrise Retirement Community. It wasn't the lakeside cottage Greg and I had dreamed about, but it was clean, safe, and within my budget. My 3 children each responded differently to their father's passing. Sarah, my oldest at 45, stepped in immediately. As a cardiologist, she channeled her grief into making sure I had the best medical care and understood all my health options. Sarah inherited my practical nature but has her father's quiet strength. She's married to David, an environmental lawyer, and they have twin boys who just started college. Kevin, my youngest at 38, took his father's death the hardest. An artist with his father's creative spirit, Kevin had always been closest to Greg. They shared that visual language I never quite understood. After the funeral, Kevin retreated to his studio apartment in Providence and immersed himself in his sculptures. It took nearly a year before he started visiting regularly again, bringing oddly shaped metal creations that he said helped him process his grief. And then there's Ryan, my middle child. At 42, Ryan has always been the most ambitious of my children. Even as a little boy, he was calculating and strategic. While other kids set up lemonade stands, Ryan franchised his operation to 3 different neighborhood children, taking a percentage of their profits. By high school, he was buying and selling collectible sneakers online for substantial markups. Now Ryan runs his own investment firm, lives in a sleek downtown condo, drives a Tesla, and is married to Megan, a marketing executive who shares his drive for success. They have 1 daughter, Lily, who attends an exclusive private school. Ryan's life looks perfect from the outside. Exactly what society tells us success should be. But something had changed in Ryan over the years. The ambitious little boy who once saved his allowance to buy his brother art supplies for Christmas seemed to have disappeared. In his place stood a man who measured worth in dollar signs and status symbols. Our conversations increasingly revolved around his latest acquisition or investment win. When Greg died, Ryan efficiently handled the financial paperwork, but it was Sarah who held my hand through sleepless nights and Kevin who simply sat with me in silence when words failed. Last Thanksgiving, Ryan spent dinner glued to his phone, monitoring stock prices. When Lily showed everyone a drawing she'd made, Ryan barely looked up. I saw the hurt in my granddaughter's eyes, and something inside me cracked. Was this who my son had become? Someone so focused on wealth that he missed the true riches surrounding him? The idea came to me gradually. What if Ryan thought I was struggling financially? Would he even notice? Would he care? It wasn't just idle curiosity. It was a mother's desperate hope that her son hadn't lost his way completely. I know testing people isn't right. My own mother would have scolded me for such dishonesty. But after watching Ryan become increasingly detached from what truly matters, I needed to know if the compassionate boy I raised still existed somewhere inside the businessman he'd become. So I created a scenario. I would tell Ryan, and only Ryan, that my pension had been reduced to $1,000 monthly due to some problems with the teachers' union pension fund. I would gauge his reaction, see if he noticed or offered help. Then I would come clean, apologize for the deception, and hopefully open a conversation about what truly matters in life. It seemed simple enough when I planned it. I never imagined how this small lie would snowball into something that would change both our lives forever. The opportunity presented itself on the first Sunday of April during our monthly family dinner. I had been hosting these gatherings since Greg died, partly to keep our family connected and partly to fill the emptiness of my apartment with familiar voices. I prepared Greg's famous pot roast recipe, the one he insisted needed exactly 3 sprigs of rosemary, no more and no less. Sarah arrived first with a bottle of wine and immediately took over arranging the table settings, gently correcting my placement of the forks. Kevin came next, bringing a strange metal sculpture that resembled either a bird or perhaps a question mark, depending on how you tilted your head. Ryan and Megan were last, 15 minutes late, with Ryan apologizing while simultaneously finishing an email on his phone. Dinner began pleasantly enough. Sarah talked about a challenging case at the hospital. Kevin described his upcoming gallery showing with animated hand gestures that nearly knocked over the gravy boat. Lily, Ryan's daughter, proudly announced she had been selected for the lead in her school play. I noticed Ryan nodding but wondered if he was really listening. The conversation meandered to neighborhood news. Mrs. Patterson down the hall had turned 98, and the retirement community was planning renovations to the common areas. Then Sarah mentioned rising property taxes, which naturally led to broader financial discussions. Speaking of finances, I said, setting down my fork with a carefully rehearsed casualness, I got some unfortunate news about my pension last week. All 3 of my children looked up, but I kept my eyes on Ryan. Apparently, there were some problems with the teachers' union pension fund investments. They've had to reduce monthly payments. I'm down to just $1,000 now. The lie felt foreign on my tongue. In 68 years I had prided myself on honesty. Greg and I had raised our children to value truth above all else. Now here I was deliberately deceiving them, deceiving Ryan to test his character. My stomach tightened with guilt. "Mom, that's terrible." Sarah immediately responded, her doctor's analytical mind already calculating. "Can they legally do that? There must be some recourse." Kevin's brow furrowed with concern. "That's not right. You paid into that system your whole career." But it was Ryan's reaction I was watching most carefully. His expression changed subtly, a momentary widening of the eyes, a slight tension around his mouth. Then his face returned to its usual composed state. He asked several pointed questions about the pension reduction, when it happened, whether other retirees were affected, if I had received official documentation. I answered vaguely, making mental notes to later claim a misunderstanding when I inevitably confessed. The guilt pressed heavier on my chest with each fabricated detail. "That's rough, Mom," Ryan finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "But you've always been good with budgeting. I'm sure you'll figure it out." His response wasn't callous exactly, but it wasn't the immediate concern his siblings displayed either. Disappointment settled in my stomach, mixing unpleasantly with my guilt. I had hoped for more, expected better from the boy who once gave his entire allowance to a classmate whose bike had been stolen. The conversation shifted to other topics, but I noticed Ryan was quieter for the remainder of dinner. Occasionally, I caught him studying me when he thought I wasn't looking, his expression unreadable. As everyone prepared to leave, Sarah hugged me tightly and whispered, "Call me tomorrow. We'll figure out what to do about that pension situation." Kevin squeezed my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, Mom. We've got your back." Ryan's goodbye was more reserved. He helped me clear the dessert plates, then kissed my cheek. "Take care of yourself, Mom. I'll call you this week." After they left, I sat alone in my suddenly quiet apartment, the weight of my deception heavy on my shoulders. The ticking of the clock Greg had given me on our 25th anniversary seemed accusatory in the silence. What had I done? Was it worth compromising my integrity to test my son? And what had I really learned? Ryan hadn't been overtly uncaring, but his response lacked the immediate concern his siblings showed. Perhaps that confirmed what I had feared, that success had hardened him, made him less empathetic to struggles he couldn't personally relate to. As I washed the dishes that night, I contemplated calling Ryan immediately to confess, but something held me back. A little voice that whispered, "Wait and see what happens next." I didn't know then how significant that decision would be, or how wrong my initial assessment of Ryan's reaction had been. A week passed with no word from Ryan. This wasn't entirely unusual. He was always busy with work, often traveling to meet clients or attending conferences. Still, given my supposed financial situation, I had expected at least a phone call. Sarah called twice, first to recommend an attorney who specialized in pension law and later to invite me to dinner at her house. Kevin texted daily check-ins, offering to sell one of his sculptures to a really interested collector. I knew this was a lie. Kevin rarely sold his work and guarded each piece like a child. His willingness to part with one for my benefit touched me deeply and intensified my guilt about the deception. By Tuesday evening, I had convinced myself that my little test had confirmed my fears about Ryan. The caring boy I'd raised had been fully consumed by the wealth-obsessed man he'd become. I was sitting in my armchair, working through a crossword puzzle and contemplating how to confess my lie, when my doorbell rang. Ryan stood in the hallway, holding 2 large paper grocery bags. Mom. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Surprised, I ushered him inside. Not at all. Just wrestling with the New York Times crossword. 7 down has me stumped. Ryan set the bags on my kitchen counter and began unpacking them. Organic vegetables, premium cuts of meat, whole grain bread, and various other staples filled my nearly empty refrigerator and pantry. Just thought I'd drop off some groceries, he said casually, as though this was something he did regularly. In reality, Ryan had never once brought me groceries in all the years since I'd moved to the retirement community. That's very thoughtful, dear, but unnecessary. I'm doing fine with groceries. It's no big deal, he shrugged, continuing to arrange items in my refrigerator. I was at that fancy organic market Megan likes, and I thought of you. After finishing with the groceries, Ryan wandered through my small apartment, stopping to examine the leaky faucet in the bathroom, the flickering light fixture in the hallway, and the sliding door to the balcony that had never closed properly. "Mom, when was the last time maintenance came by to check on these issues?" he asked, jiggling the balcony door handle. "Oh, they're quite busy. I put in requests, but there's quite a backlog," I answered, watching him curiously. Ryan pulled out his phone and made a note. "What's the maintenance supervisor's name? I'll give them a call tomorrow." "That's really not necessary." "It's no problem," he interrupted. "These things should be fixed. You're paying to live here after all." There was a slight emphasis on the word paying that didn't escape my notice. We sat in the living room afterward, and Ryan asked questions about my daily expenses, utilities, medications, transportation costs. I maintained my lie about the reduced pension, feeling increasingly uncomfortable as Ryan took notes on his phone. "Just trying to get a picture of your monthly budget," he explained when I asked what he was writing. "Basic financial planning. It's what I do, remember." Before leaving, Ryan fixed the wobbly leg on my coffee table and replaced the burnt-out bulb in my reading lamp with one he'd apparently brought with him. "I'll be back on Saturday to look at that balcony door," he said, hugging me goodbye. "And Mom? Don't skip your medications to save money. That's not a place to cut corners." The comment startled me. I hadn't mentioned anything about medications. After he left, I called my friend Patricia, who lived 3 floors down. Patricia had been my confidant since I moved to Sunrise Retirement Community. We had bonded over our shared love of mystery novels and disgust with the bland cafeteria food. "You did what?" Patricia exclaimed when I explained my deception. "Eleanor Thompson, in all the years I've known you, I never took you for a manipulator." I know. It was wrong," I admitted. "But you should have seen him today, Patty. He brought groceries. He fixed things around the apartment. He's coming back on Saturday to fix more things. And you think this proves your test is working? That deep down, he's still the caring boy you raised. Patricia's tone was skeptical. I don't know what to think, I confessed. Part of me is touched by his concern, but another part wonders if he's just doing what's expected, the bare minimum. Well, you've opened Pandora's box now, Patricia said. I just hope you're prepared for whatever flies out. I hung up feeling conflicted. Ryan's visit had surprised me, but was it enough to indicate genuine concern? Or was he simply going through the motions of filial duty? And how long could I maintain this charade before the truth inevitably came to light? The answer to that last question, as it turned out, was not very long at all. Over the next month, subtle but significant changes in Ryan's behavior began to emerge. The son who once barely had time for our weekly phone calls was suddenly a regular fixture in my life. The promised Saturday visit to fix my balcony door turned into a 4-hour handyman session. Ryan arrived with a toolbox I'd never seen before and methodically addressed every minor repair issue in my apartment. He replaced the washers in my leaky faucets, recaulked around the bathtub, oiled squeaky hinges, and finally fixed the balcony door that had stubbornly refused to close properly since I moved in. Where did you learn to do all this? I asked, genuinely surprised as I watched him efficiently replace a cracked electrical outlet cover. Ryan shrugged. YouTube tutorials mostly. And I picked up a few things helping Dad with projects around the house when I was a kid. The casual reference to Greg caught me off guard. Ryan rarely mentioned his father anymore, as though that chapter of his life had been neatly filed away like one of his business reports. Your father would be impressed, I said softly. He always said you had good hands for detail work. Something flickered across Ryan's face, a momentary softening I hadn't seen in years. I miss him, he said simply, before quickly returning to the task at hand. The repair session became a weekly occurrence. Each Saturday, Ryan would arrive, tools in hand, and tackle another project. Sometimes Lily would accompany him, sitting cross-legged on my living room floor with her homework while her father worked. I treasured these moments, using them to reconnect with my granddaughter over cookies and stories about her father's childhood. But the repairs were just the beginning. One Wednesday afternoon, I went to Walgreens to pick up my blood pressure medication. When I reached the counter, the pharmacist smiled and said, "You're all set, Mrs. Thompson. Your son already took care of it." Confused, I insisted there must be a mistake. The pharmacist checked her computer and confirmed that Ryan had indeed paid for my monthly prescriptions. All of them. I left the pharmacy feeling both touched and increasingly uneasy about my deception. The following week, I noticed something odd about my electric bill. The amount due was $0. Thinking it must be a mistake, I called the utility company. "Your account has been paid in full, Mrs. Thompson," the representative informed me. "Your son set up automatic payments. He also paid the next 3 months in advance." That evening, I received a call from Sarah. "Mom, Ryan called me asking about your medications. He wanted to know if there were generic alternatives that would be more affordable. What's going on? Are you having money troubles you're not telling us about?" The concern in her voice intensified my guilt. My little lie was spreading, affecting not just Ryan but the entire family. I deflected Sarah's questions as best I could, promising her that everything was under control. 2 days later, Ryan invited me to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. As we sat across from each other in the dimly lit dining room, I noticed subtle changes in his appearance. The designer watch he usually wore was absent. His normally perfectly tailored suit looked slightly older, though still impeccable. Throughout dinner, Ryan steered the conversation toward my living situation, asking pointed questions about Sunrise Retirement Community, the monthly fees, the quality of services, whether I was truly happy there. "I've been researching some other retirement communities," he said casually, showing me listings on his phone. "There's one in Brookline that has lower monthly fees but excellent ratings for care and amenities." "Ryan," I said carefully, "are you suggesting I move?" "Just exploring options, Mom. It never hurts to know what's available." He scrolled through more listings. "This one even has a community garden. I know how much you've missed gardening since you left the house." The fact that he remembered my love for gardening, Something I hadn't mentioned in years struck me deeply. Ryan had been paying attention all along, noticing details about my life I thought he'd forgotten. After dinner, Ryan drove me home. As we pulled up to my building, he hesitated before speaking. "Mom, I want you to know that you don't have to worry about money. If you need help, all you have to do is ask." The sincerity in his voice made the lie sitting between us feel even more substantial. I mumbled something non-committal and quickly said goodnight, afraid that if I stayed in the car any longer, I might confess everything. The next day, Sarah called again. "Ryan asked me if I could cover your health insurance copays," she said without preamble. "Mom, what's really going on? Are things worse than you're letting on?" "It's complicated," I replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Ryan is just being cautious." "Well, he's got Kevin worried too." Kevin called me in tears, talking about selling his gallery pieces to help with your expenses. My heart sank. My deception was now causing real distress to all my children. What had started as a simple test of Ryan's character had evolved into something far more complex and potentially damaging. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, listing all the things Ryan had done since I told him about my supposedly reduced pension: weekly repair visits, grocery deliveries every Tuesday, paying for my medications, settling my utility bills, researching more affordable living options, enlisting his siblings' financial support. The evidence was undeniable. My son, the son I had judged as materialistic and detached, had been quietly, systematically ensuring my welfare without fanfare or recognition. He hadn't just offered token assistance. He had restructured his life to accommodate my perceived needs. I decided then that I needed to come clean. The test was over. Ryan had more than proved himself, and continuing the deception would only cause more harm to our family. But before I could implement my plan to confess, life took an unexpected turn that would push my deception and Ryan's response to its crisis point. The pneumonia came on suddenly. One evening I felt fine, and by the next morning, I was struggling to breathe, my chest burning with each shallow intake of air. I managed to call the front desk at sunrise before collapsing on my bedroom floor. I have fragmented memories of the ambulance ride. Oxygen masks, concerned faces, the wail of sirens cutting through my feverish haze. The hospital admission is equally blurry. Bright lights, urgent voices, the cold stethoscope against my burning skin. When I fully regained consciousness, I was in a private hospital room with an IV in my arm and an oxygen cannula in my nose. Ryan was asleep in a chair beside my bed, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled. His suit jacket hung crookedly on the back of the chair, his tie loosened and shirt wrinkled. Even in my medicated state, I could see the dark circles under his eyes. A nurse entered quietly to check my vital signs. When she saw I was awake, she smiled warmly. "Your son hasn't left since you were admitted 3 days ago," she whispered, adjusting my IV. "We tried to convince him to go home and rest, but he refused. Said he needed to be here when you woke up." 3 days? I had lost 3 entire days to this illness. And Ryan had been here the whole time, keeping vigil in that uncomfortable-looking chair. As the nurse left, Ryan stirred and opened his eyes. When he saw me watching him, relief washed over his face. "Mom," he said, immediately moving to my bedside. "How are you feeling? Do you need anything? Water? Are you in pain?" "I'm okay," I rasped, my throat dry and voice weak. "Just tired. You look terrible." A small smile cracked his worried expression. "Thanks a lot. You're not exactly ready for a photo shoot yourself, you know?" He helped me sip water through a straw, then explained that I had developed severe pneumonia. The doctor had been concerned about complications given my age, but the antibiotics were finally working. "You gave us quite a scare," Ryan said, his attempt at casualness belied by the tremor in his voice. "Sarah's been consulting with your doctors. Kevin's been handling things at your apartment. And I've been sleeping in that awful chair. I finished for him. For 3 days, according to the nurse." Ryan shrugged. "Someone needed to be here. I've just been working remotely." He gestured to his laptop on the windowsill. Later that afternoon, while Ryan stepped out to take a call, I heard voices just outside my door. "How much longer can you keep this up, Ryan?" A woman's voice. Megan, Ryan's wife. You haven't been home in days. Lily keeps asking when you're coming back. What am I supposed to do, Megan? She's my mother. Ryan's voice sounded strained, exhausted. I know that. I'm not saying abandon her. But you can't keep going like this. You're not eating, barely sleeping. You canceled the Denver meeting. That client was important. Everything's on hold right now. Mom comes first. And what about the car collection? Ryan, those cars were your pride and joy. You've been collecting them since college. My ears perked up at this. What about Ryan's vintage cars? It was just stuff, Megan. Things. They're not important. 3 classic Porsches aren't just things. You sold them for a fraction of what they're worth because you were in a hurry to liquidate. I got enough to set up Mom's fund. That's all that matters. And what about our fund? The down payment we've been saving for the lake house? The property you've had your eye on for 5 years is finally on the market, and now we can't afford it. There was a long pause before Ryan responded, his voice quieter now. We'll find another house. Another time. Right now my mother needs financial security more than we need a vacation home. Your mother has $3,000 coming in every month from her pension. With Social Security and your father's life insurance, she's hardly destitute. My heart froze. How did Megan know about my actual pension amount? Keep your voice down, Ryan hissed. She only gets $1,000 now. There were problems with the pension fund. That's not what Sarah told me. She said your mother's pension is perfectly intact. $3,000 monthly, same as always. Another long pause. Sarah must be mistaken. Or your mother is. Ryan, have you actually seen any documentation about this supposed pension reduction? Have you verified any of this? I couldn't hear Ryan's response as their voices moved farther down the hallway, but I had heard enough. The tangled web of my deception was unraveling fast. Sarah had inadvertently exposed my lie to Megan, who had now raised doubts in Ryan's mind. But more importantly, I had just learned that Ryan had sold his beloved vintage car collection to create a fund for me. The cars he had painstakingly restored over years, pouring his heart and substantial amounts of money into each one. The collection he had once told me he would pass down to his own children someday. He had sacrificed his passion, liquidated precious assets, canceled important business meetings, and strained his marriage, all to ensure that his supposedly financially struggling mother would be secure. The magnitude of his sacrifice hit me like a physical blow. While I had been sitting in judgment of Ryan's character, questioning his values and compassion, he had been silently rearranging his entire life to accommodate my needs. Needs that weren't even real. Tears slid down my cheeks as the full weight of my deception settled on my chest, heavier than the pneumonia that had sent me to the hospital. I had done a terrible thing. I had tested my son's love through dishonesty and manipulation, and in response he had given up things precious to him without hesitation or recognition. In that moment, lying in my hospital bed, I made a decision. As soon as I was discharged, I would confess everything. I would beg Ryan's forgiveness and do whatever was necessary to make amends, even if it meant he never trusted me again, even if it damaged our relationship permanently. The truth had to come out no matter the consequences. The hospital discharged me 5 days later, once my oxygen levels stabilized and the fever remained consistently normal. Ryan insisted I stay with him and Megan until I was fully recovered, but I firmly declined. I needed to be in my own space for what would come next. What I didn't anticipate was Ryan's thorough preparation for my homecoming. When he unlocked my apartment door and ushered me inside, I was greeted by a transformation. The space had been deep cleaned with fresh flowers on every surface. The refrigerator was stocked, medications organized on the counter with a detailed schedule, and a new, more comfortable chair had replaced my old recliner. I hired a home health aide to check on you daily, Ryan explained, showing me a binder filled with information. Angela will come every morning to help with anything you need. She's fully certified and came highly recommended. Ryan, this is too much. It's already arranged, he interrupted gently. Just until you're back on your feet. The service is covered for 3 months. I sank into my new chair, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness and increasingly burdened by my guilt. Ryan moved around the apartment, pointing out other changes, an emergency call button by the bed, grab bars newly installed in the bathroom, a meal delivery service scheduled 3 times weekly. How are you paying for all this? I asked, though I already knew the answer from what I'd overheard at the hospital. Ryan waved dismissively. Don't worry about that. It's taken care of. With the money from selling your car collection? The words escaped before I could stop them. Ryan froze, his back to me as he arranged pill bottles on the kitchen counter. How did you know about that? I overheard you talking to Megan at the hospital. He turned slowly, his expression carefully neutral. It's not a big deal, Mom. They were just cars. They weren't just cars to you, Ryan. You loved those Porsches. You spent years finding and restoring them. He shrugged, but I could see the effort it took for him to appear casual. Some things are more important than vintage cars. Like making sure your mother is taken care of after her pension was cut? I pressed, my heart pounding. Exactly. He nodded, turning back to the medications. I took a deep breath. There would never be a perfect moment for this confession. It had to be now. Ryan, we need to talk. Please sit down. Something in my tone must have alerted him. He came over slowly and sat across from me, his expression concerned. Are you feeling worse? Should I call the doctor? No, it's not that. I folded my hands in my lap to stop them from trembling. I need to tell you something important. Something I'm deeply ashamed of. Ryan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Whatever it is, Mom, we'll figure it out together. His immediate support only deepened my shame. My pension was never reduced, I said, the words rushing out before I could lose my nerve. I've been receiving the full $3,000 all along. I lied to you, Ryan. His expression shifted from concern to confusion. What? But why would you? I wanted to test you, I admitted, unable to meet his eyes. I wanted to see if you would care. If you would help if you thought I was struggling financially. The silence that followed my confession was deafening. When I finally gathered the courage to look at Ryan, the hurt and bewilderment on his face was unbearable. You tested me? His voice was barely audible. Like some sort of character exam? I know it was wrong, I said quickly. Terribly wrong. I've been worried about you, about your values. You seem so focused on money and status. I hardly recognized the compassionate boy I raised. Ryan stood abruptly, pacing the small living room. So you decided to manipulate me? To lie about something as serious as your financial security. I never imagined you would go to such lengths. The groceries, the repairs, those I expected. But selling your cars? Setting up a fund for me? I never wanted. What did you want, Mom? Ryan's voice rose, anger replacing confusion. To prove I'm a terrible son? That I care more about material things than my own mother? No. Just the opposite. I wanted reassurance that you still had your father's heart underneath all the business success. And you couldn't just talk to me? Ask me directly about my values. Ryan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Do you have any idea what you've put our family through? Sarah's been researching pension law. Kevin offered to sell his art, which by the way I know he can barely part with. And Megan and I. He stopped, turning away. What about you and Megan? I prompted gently. We've been fighting constantly. She thinks I'm overreacting, martyring myself unnecessarily. And maybe she was right. He laughed bitterly. Turns out it was all a test anyway. The hurt in his voice cut me deeply. Ryan, I'm so sorry. More sorry than I can express. What I did was inexcusable. I let my concerns cloud my judgment, and I hurt everyone I love in the process. Why, Mom? What did I ever do to make you doubt me this way? The raw pain in his question broke something open inside me. Tears filled my eyes as years of observations and worries poured out. You changed after college. The ambitious little boy became a man who seemed to value wealth above all else. When your father died, you handled the paperwork, but it was Sarah who sat with me through grief and Kevin who shared memories. You were always rushing off to meetings, checking your phone during family dinners. Even with Lily, I've seen her trying to get your attention while you're on calls. I started to wonder if success had hardened you, made you forget what truly matters. Ryan sat down heavily, his anger seemingly deflated by my words. So you decided to trick me instead of talking to me about these concerns? It was wrong, I repeated. Inexcusably wrong. I can only ask for your forgiveness, though I don't deserve it. Ryan was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled but tight with emotion. I need some time to process this, Mom. I'm glad you're okay health-wise, but I need space to think about everything. He stood and collected his jacket. Angela will be here tomorrow morning at 9. Her number is on the refrigerator if you need anything before then. Ryan. I reached for him, but he stepped back. I'll check in tomorrow, he said, already moving toward the door. But right now I need to leave. After he was gone, I sat motionless in my new comfortable chair, surrounded by all the thoughtful preparations he had made for my recovery, each one a physical reminder of my terrible misjudgment. I called Sarah that evening to confess everything. Her initial shock gave way to disappointed understanding. Oh, Mom, she sighed. What were you thinking? I wasn't thinking clearly, I admitted. I was acting from fear and judgment, not wisdom or love. Kevin took the news more lightheartedly when I called him next, though I detected hurt beneath his casual response. So Ryan passed your secret mom test? Good for him. Though maybe next time just ask us to fill out a questionnaire instead. For the next week, Ryan maintained a polite distance. He called daily to check on my recovery but declined my invitations to visit. Angela, the home health aide, reported that he called her every evening for updates on my condition. I existed in a limbo of recovery and regret, gaining physical strength while my heart remained heavy with the knowledge that I had damaged my relationship with my son in ways that might never fully heal. Then, exactly 1 week after my confession, Ryan appeared at my door unannounced. Ryan stood in my doorway looking different somehow, not physically but in his bearing. Gone was the slick businessman persona he'd cultivated over the years. Instead, he reminded me of his teenage self, slightly uncertain but determined. Can I come in? He asked, holding a brown paper bag. I brought soup from that deli you like on Charles Street. I stepped aside, hope flickering cautiously in my chest. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. He moved to the kitchen, unpacking containers of matzo ball soup and fresh bread. The familiar aroma filled my apartment, comforting and bittersweet. We sat at my small dining table, the steam from our soup bowls rising between us like a fragile connection. For several minutes we ate in silence. I didn't dare speak first, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Finally, Ryan set down his spoon. I've been doing a lot of thinking this past week. I understand if you're still angry, I said softly. You have every right to be. I was angry, he acknowledged. Hurt too. It felt like a betrayal of trust. My own mother setting up an elaborate test instead of just talking to me about her concerns. I nodded, accepting his words without defense. But then I started thinking about why you felt the need to test me in the first place. Ryan looked directly at me now. About the kind of son, the kind of man I've become that would make my own mother doubt my basic compassion. Ryan, you've always been. He held up a hand, stopping me. Please, Mom. Let me finish. This is important. I fell silent, giving him the space to continue. The truth is, you weren't entirely wrong about me. His admission surprised me. Somewhere along the way, I did start measuring success in dollars and status. I convinced myself I was building security for my family, but I was really chasing validation. Each promotion, each investment win, became proof of my worth. Ryan stared into his soup, as though the answers floated among the matzo balls. When Dad died, I didn't know how to handle the grief. Sarah's good with emotions. Kevin processes through his art. But me? I threw myself into managing the practical details because spreadsheets and paperwork don't make you feel. The insight into my son's coping mechanism brought tears to my eyes. I never realized. How could you? I never talked about it. Instead, I just worked harder, earned more, bought more. But none of it filled the emptiness. Ryan took a deep breath. When you told me your pension had been cut, something shifted. Suddenly, there was a concrete problem I could solve. I could take care of you the way Dad would have wanted. By selling your car collection, I said gently. Cars you loved. Ryan smiled ruefully. That's the thing, Mom. Once I decided to sell them for your fund, I realized how little they actually meant. They were just things. Expensive things that I'd convinced myself represented success. He reached across the table and took my hand. So while your method was questionable, the test itself might have been exactly what I needed. It forced me to reevaluate what truly matters. Relief and love washed over me in equal measure. I'm still deeply sorry for deceiving you, Ryan. It was wrong no matter the outcome. It was, he agreed. And it hurt. But I understand why you did it. I haven't been present, really present, in our family for a long time. I've been physically there but mentally elsewhere. Always calculating the next move, the next acquisition. You've made changes these past few weeks, I observed. Even before my illness. Ryan nodded. Taking care of your apartment, making sure your needs were met. It reconnected me to what's real. Not numbers on a spreadsheet but actual human care. Felt right. Like coming home to myself. And Megan? Are things okay between you two? A genuine smile spread across Ryan's face. Better than okay, actually. We had a long talk after I left here last week. I told her I was withdrawing from the lake house bidding war. Not because we couldn't afford it, but because I realized I was buying it for the wrong reasons. Status, bragging rights, another trophy. That must have been disappointing for her. Actually, she was relieved. Said she'd been trying to tell me for years that I was working too much, focusing on the wrong things. She never wanted the fancy house or the prestige. She just wanted me. The real me, present and engaged with her and Lily. Tears filled my eyes. I'm so proud of you, Ryan. Not for what you've achieved professionally, but for your capacity to reflect and grow. I had good teachers, he said, squeezing my hand. You and Dad raised us to value substance over show. I just lost my way for a while. We spent the next 2 hours talking more openly than we had in years. Ryan shared his fears about living up to his father's example, his struggles with work-life balance, his worries about being a good father to Lily. I told him about my own fears of aging, of becoming irrelevant, of losing connection with my children as their lives grew increasingly busy. As our conversation drew to a close, Ryan helped me wash the soup containers and put them in the recycling bin. So, he said, leaning against the kitchen counter, where do we go from here? Forward, I hope, I replied. With more honesty and less deception on my part. And more presence and less materialism on mine. Ryan checked his watch, the simple Timex his father had given him for his 16th birthday, not the expensive Swiss timepiece he'd worn for years. Lily has a recital this Saturday. She'd love it if her grandmother could come. I wouldn't miss it, I promised. The following Sunday, I hosted our monthly family dinner again. This time I asked everyone to arrive an hour early. When Sarah, Kevin, Ryan, and their families were all settled in my living room, I took a deep breath and confessed my deception to everyone. I owe you all an apology, I began, explaining my lie about the pension and the reasoning behind it. Kevin's eyebrows shot up. So it was all a test? Mom, that's either diabolical or brilliant. I can't decide which. Sarah was more measured. It was manipulative, Mom, but I understand the impulse. We all want reassurance that our children embody our values. Ryan, who already knew everything, simply squeezed my hand in support. The point is, I continued, I was wrong to deceive you all, but through my error I learned something important. I raised 3 remarkable children who each show love and care in different ways. And I need to respect and appreciate those differences instead of measuring you against arbitrary standards. And I learned something too, Ryan added, addressing his siblings. Mom's test helped me realize how far I drifted from what really matters. I've been so focused on financial success that I've been missing the real wealth surrounding me. Family, relationships, being present for the people I love. Kevin nodded thoughtfully. Not gonna lie, bro. We did notice the change in you these past few years. The important thing, Sarah interjected in her practical way, is that we're talking about it now. All of us. That dinner became a turning point for our family. We established a new tradition of honest conversations alongside our shared meals. Ryan scaled back his work hours and became more involved with Lily's activities. He and Megan decided to renovate their current home, instead of buying a status symbol property. Most surprisingly to me, Ryan started volunteering at a financial literacy program for low-income families, using his expertise to help others build security. As for me, I learned that trust works both ways. I needed to trust my children's unique expressions of love, rather than testing them against my preconceived notions. Ryan showed care through practical assistance, Sarah through attentive concern, and Kevin through emotional presence. Each valuable, each authentic to who they are. The pension lie, my misguided attempt to reveal Ryan's true character, ended up revealing more about me than about him. It exposed my fears, judgments, and failure to communicate openly with my own son. But it also created an opportunity for growth and deeper understanding that might otherwise never have occurred. Now, nearly a year later, our family relationships are stronger than they've been since Gregory died. Ryan comes by every Saturday, sometimes to help with household projects but more often just to visit. He brings Lily, who's teaching me to use Instagram, much to my bewilderment and her amusement. We've even started a small container garden on my balcony together. The three of us planting herbs and tomatoes in the spring sunshine. I still feel occasional twinges of guilt about my deception, but Ryan's forgiveness has been complete and genuine. Let it go, Mom, he told me the last time I tried to apologize. Sometimes the wrong actions lead us to the right place. Life continues to teach me that our children are not extensions of ourselves to be tested and judged, but individuals with their own journeys and their own ways of expressing love. My role is not to evaluate their worth, but to recognize and celebrate their unique gifts. I'd like to know if any of you have experienced similar misunderstandings in your families. Have you ever judged a loved one unfairly, only to discover you were missing part of the picture? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my experience, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more reflections on family, aging, and the lessons life teaches us when we least expect them. Thank you for listening to this chapter of my journey. I'm grateful to have shared it with you.